Malcolm was someone who I considered a friend, and we always had great times together.
A beach in Costa Rica. A legend falls after 45 desperate minutes of resuscitation. The tragic news spreads in an instant, leaving Hollywood in shock. What really happened in the final days of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, and then Anthony Mackie appeared. At 46, the Marvel star someone few would have guessed was close to Malcolm stepped forward to break the silence. He didn't weep publicly. He didn't lean on cliches. Instead, Mackie exposed the truth, a truth that left Hollywood breathless. He spoke of their last conversations, of the hidden anxieties Malcolm carried, and of a loneliness so profound that even those nearest to him couldn't see it. Anthony Mackie's presence in Malcolm's life was an unlikely intersection. Born in 1978 in New Orleans, a city where jazz floats down every street corner, yet scarred by poverty and prejudice. Mackie, at 46, had become one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Millions around the globe knew him as Falcon, and later as Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But beneath the superhero mantle, Mackie bore wounds of his own. The times he was underestimated, the lonely days behind the bright lights, the fear that it all might be fleeting. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, though he entered the industry nearly a decade earlier, carried a similar burden. Once the boy America called everyone's son on The Cosby Show, he grew up under the immense shadow of Theo Huxtable. He was loved yet confined. Audiences laughed, but few thought about the isolation he faced once the cameras stopped rolling. Mackie never forgot that before he became a superhero on screen, he was just a boy sitting in front of the TV following every episode of The Cosby Show. What moved many people most about Anthony Mackie's words was his bond with Malcolm-Jamal Warner dating back to his own childhood. Mackie shared that he grew up with The Cosby Show, never missing a single episode, and in the image of Theo Huxtable he saw himself. A clumsy boy in a house full of sisters, always feeling out of place, always yearning to look cooler in the eyes of others. That sense of connection ran so deep that even the lessons Theo learned from his on-screen father about money were lessons Mackie himself experienced in real life during talks with his own dad. According to Mackie, his entire generation grew up alongside Theo Huxtable, and almost everyone wanted to be that boy at some point, because in Theo, they found themselves. For that reason, the passing of Malcolm-Jamal Warner was not only a loss to the artistic and film community, but also a spiritual blow to all those who had grown up with the character he brought to life. To Mackie, Warner was more than a talented actor. He was a good man, a spiritual older brother, a source of positive energy whose presence always brought joy. Mackie affirmed that the day Warner passed was indeed a sad one, but also a moment to honor what Warner left behind, not just a mark on the entertainment industry, but a spiritual legacy for an entire generation. A generation that saw their childhood, their insecurities, and their dreams reflected in the image of Theo Huxtable, and in the man himself, Malcolm-Jamal Warner. That bond seemed destined to remain nothing more than the distance of a screen. But years later, both men found themselves in the grown-up world of Hollywood. Their paths crossed at film events, award shows, and industry gatherings. Mackie would later confirm that it was then he realized a strange harmony existed between him and Malcolm. From a fan, Mackie became a friend. And not just a casual one, but someone Malcolm trusted with private thoughts, confessions rarely spoken in public. Mackie often emphasized in interviews, "Every time I was around him, I took full advantage of those conversations and that time." That was the strange intersection. The boy who once grew up watching Malcolm on screen had become one of the few who could truly understand him, who could truly listen. And in those private moments, Mackie touched the deepest corners of Malcolm's soul, the haunting question of legacy and the fear of being forgotten. Will anyone remember me beyond Theo Huxtable? Malcolm asked this again and again, as if confronting himself. The final day's legacy and the fear of being forgotten. In May 2025, just a little over 2 months before Malcolm-Jamal Warner drew his final breath, he appeared on an episode of Hot and Bothered with Melissa Ford. It wasn't a loud conversation, nor a promotional push for a new project. Instead, Warner chose to open his heart about the one thing he found himself reflecting on most as he crossed into his 50s legacy. In his familiar, deep, warm voice, he confessed, "I just want people to remember I was a good dude." Simple, direct, without a hint of grandstanding. Yet the words rang out like a quiet farewell spoken before fate came crashing down. A legacy, beyond the spotlight. Across 40 years in the industry, Malcolm had collected every title imaginable: child prodigy, America's golden boy Cosby star. He had earned an Emmy nomination at just 16 and moved seamlessly through roles as actor, director, producer, and musician. But in middle age, when he looked back, he seemed unconcerned with the trophies or credits on his resume. The only thing he mentioned, the only thing he hoped the world would remember, was the essence of who he was as a person. For many, this came as a surprise. To the audience, Malcolm would always be Theo Huxtable, the lovable, awkward boy from The Cosby Show. But for him, being remembered as a good man meant far more than being remembered as a star. The podcast host later recalled that Malcolm had seemed calm that day. He joked, he laughed, he carried the charm of a seasoned entertainer. But when he said, "I just want people to remember, I was a good dude," there was a fleeting heaviness in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had lived long enough to know that glory is never permanent, and that oblivion can arrive faster than we expect. To many, the remark sounded casual, but to those closest to him, especially Anthony Mackie, it was a warning sign. Mackie Connect, Private Confessions, Meet Public Words. In their private talks, Mackie had heard Malcolm express the exact same fear that when people thought of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, all they would ever see was Theo Huxtable, and never the man himself. Mackie remembered he once asked me, "Will anyone remember me beyond Theo?" When Mackie heard the May podcast, he shivered. What Malcolm shared publicly was the same burden he had whispered in private. The words matched. The obsession matched. The only difference was that on the podcast, Malcolm disguised it with a smile and a steady nod. For Mackie, it was the clearest evidence yet that his friend carried a weight the rest of the world had missed. When fear eats away. In his final days, Warner showed no outward signs of collapse. He still appeared on podcasts. He still worked. He still co-hosted Not All Hood. Friends said he still laughed, still talked about music, still projected energy. But it was that very normalcy that made the tragedy even more haunting. Because behind the calm exterior, Malcolm always returned to the same haunting question, what will I leave behind? In Mackie's emotional retelling, Malcolm-Jamal Warner emerged not as an untouchable icon, but as flesh and blood, a man wrestling with pressures that weighed heavily on him. Beyond the stage lights, beyond the applause, he was simply a middle-aged man, burdened with worries few ever saw. The pressure of the craft. After the breakout success of The Resident, Warner refused to stand still. He poured himself into a new passion project, the podcast Not All Hood. For him, it wasn't just art. It was proof he could still create, still command a voice in an unforgiving entertainment industry. But that ambition came with fear. Warner once admitted to Mackie, "I'm not sure I can keep my place in this game." On the surface, it sounded like a joke. Beneath it, though, was the tremor of a man terrified of being erased by Hollywood's relentless churn, a body in decline. Warner could not hide the truth that his body was beginning to betray him. Constant touring, endless events, they drained him. To Mackie, these complaints weren't just momentary fatigue, but signs of a man realizing that time was no longer on his side. Warner once looked Mackie straight in the eye, his voice dropping, "My body. It's not the same anymore." A short admission, but one heavy with the bitterness of 54 years when passion and spirit still burned, but the body could no longer keep pace. A father's wish. And perhaps what touched Mackie most deeply was the love Warner held for his young daughter. In every conversation, his eyes lit up when he spoke of her. Warner would whisper as though in prayer, "I just want her to be proud of me. I want her to remember a father who never gave up." Behind the spotlight, the projects, the awards, and the applause, what he longed for most was something simple: seeing pride in his daughter's eyes. Anthony Mackie wept. More than anyone he understood, this was the heart of a man who had given his life to art, yet in the end, only hoped to keep the love and admiration of his family. In those final days, Malcolm-Jamal Warner revealed his vulnerability, his pride and his love, a truth the public had never known. He did not speak of wealth houses or Hollywood milestones. Everything distilled into one simple wish to be remembered as a good man, a devoted father, and a true friend in the eyes of those closest to him. A man's legacy is not just a role. In those last days, Malcolm quietly redefined what legacy meant. For him, it wasn't about the roles etched into television history, but about smaller human imprints, the way he inspired his colleagues, the way he nurtured friendships quietly but deeply, like with Anthony Mackie, the way he made time for family, shielding his daughter from the public glare. Above all, the way he lived so that anyone who met him could say he was a good man. He had carried these fears privately, whispering them only to those he truly trusted. But his sudden death turned those confessions into an echoing void. The final days in Costa Rica, a shroud of mystery. In July 2025, Malcolm-Jamal Warner chose Costa Rica as a getaway. It was supposed to be a chance to recharge, to savor the turquoise waters and tropical air. But no one knew it would be the final chapter of his life. On July 20th, on a quiet beach, Warner was caught in a rip current. He collapsed suddenly in the waves. Witnesses recalled chaos, screams, frantic arms pulling him to shore. Paramedics rushed in, battling to revive him for 45 agonizing minutes. It was all in vain. The official cause of death was announced asphyxiation by submersion, but questions began to swirl. Rumors spread across U.S. media. Warner had been struggling with health issues, his mental state unstable. Some sources even hinted at private secrets he had been hiding, tied somehow to his final days there. Costa Rica, long known as a paradise escape, suddenly became a veil of mystery surrounding Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death, a place where unanswered questions began to devour public curiosity. But the secrets didn't stop there. A week of silence, explanation, or concealment. Among all those close to Malcolm, no one was more anticipated to speak than Keshia Knight Pulliam, his little sister on screen for 40 years since The Cosby Show. From 1984 onward, they were Theo and Rudy America's sibling duo. Off-screen, that bond grew into a family-like friendship. So when Warner died, all eyes turned to Keshia. What would she say? How would she honor him? But instead, there was silence. For 7 days after his death, Pulliam did not appear before the press, issue a statement, or post a single word on social media. In an era where a single tweet can shape public opinion, her silence was a shock. Media frenzy. By the second day, U.S. tabloids were ablaze with headlines. What is Keshia hiding? Why hasn't his closest friend spoken? Talk shows dissected the silence. Was she too grief-stricken to speak, or did she know a truth she could not yet reveal? Fans split into two camps. One side empathized. She needs time. Anyone who loses a loved one deserves silence to heal. The other side grew suspicious. If they were truly close, why not speak immediately? Something feels off. On Reddit and Twitter X, theories multiplied. Some speculated Keshia knew about Malcolm's declining health, his mental struggles, or even personal relationships never made public. 1 week of silence became 1 week of suspicion. On July 27, 2025, 7 days after Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death, Keshia Knight Pulliam finally broke it. She posted on Instagram calling Warner her big brother, writing, "A week ago, I lost my big brother, but I gained an angel. I love you. I miss you. We got our girls." One sentence. Yet the world shook. Millions of shares, countless hearts, and tear emojis flooded her post. But once the wave of emotion subsided, another ripple surfaced. Were 4 words enough? For fans, the tribute felt too brief, too cold for a 40-year bond. It was like a door closing, leaving a cavern of unanswered questions. Why only 4 words? Were they truly from the heart, or another curtain hiding what Keshia could not or would not say? The unexpected shift. Just as speculation over Pulliam's silence reached fever pitch, another name suddenly emerged, reshaping the entire narrative. While the Warner family stayed quiet and colleagues offered only safe platitudes, Anthony Mackie, the friend no one expected, stepped forward. And he didn't choose flowery words. He chose to tear the curtain away with a truth that left Hollywood breathless. Mackie speaks. When the truth is laid bare. Anthony Mackie didn't need a long speech, nor did he reach for hollow platitudes. His words cut through the air like a knife. Mackie didn't call Malcolm a colleague. He didn't call him a co-star. He called him brother. A bond that went beyond profession, something closer to family. In an exclusive interview with People on August 2, 2025, he said just one short sentence, yet it was enough to send shockwaves through Hollywood. "I'm proud to say Malcolm-Jamal Warner was a friend of mine. He's somebody that I knew and spent time with, and just was such a beautiful human being. And every time I was around him, I was able to take full advantage of those conversations and that time." This was not simply a tribute. It was testimony. And instantly, it erupted into a media storm. When one sentence became a global headline, within hours of the People, peace outlets everywhere picked it up. Cinema Blend splashed a headline, "Anthony Mackie shares proud thoughts about Malcolm-Jamal Warner." following his death. Soap Central dissected every line, highlighting how Mackie had called Warner a beautiful human being and a late friend. Meanwhile, Yahoo News went cold and concise. Anthony Mackie proud to call Malcolm a friend. Each headline carried its own shade, but they all shared one truth Mackie's words had broken beyond an interview, reshaping the memory of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. The social media firestorm. Once the press lit the match, social media turned it into a blaze. On Twitter X, within a single day, tens of thousands of posts surged under the hashtags #MackieSpeaks, #Remember Malcolm, #Truth about Theo. One side wept. Fans wrote, "Thank you, Mackie, for reminding the world he was more than Theo. Now we know the pain he carried and the love he gave." To them, Mackie had voiced the truth Malcolm had spent years suppressing. He was a complex man, layered and human, not just the Huxtable kid of the 80s. The backlash. He said too much. But almost as quickly the backlash came. Deadline questioned. If the Warner family chose silence, why did Mackie feel the need to speak for them? Anonymous colleagues whispered in industry columns. Some truths belong in the room between two friends, not splashed across headlines. And online sharp criticism flooded in. This is clout chasing disguised as grief. Talking about his fears isn't honoring him, it's exposing him. Hollywood is used to safe condolences. Mackie's decision to break that mold made him the center of controversy, courageous or crossing a line. Yet amid the storm, one crucial detail went unnoticed by many. Mackie had not aired scandals. He didn't dredge up controversy, didn't peddle conspiracy theories, didn't sensationalize. What he exposed was emotional truth, that in his final days, Malcolm lived haunted by legacy and by the fear of being forgotten. That he worried the world would remember only Theo Huxtable, not Malcolm-Jamal Warner, the man of flesh and blood with his pain, his love, his goodness. It wasn't as explosive as scandal, but it cut deeper than any secret. It forced the public to face a spiritual tragedy, a star adored by millions, yet departing this world fearing no one would remember his true self. As Warner's family stayed silent, as colleagues echoed safe phrases, Mackie became the only one willing to tear through the silence. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for the right moment. He simply spoke what he knew, what he heard, what he lived alongside. At 46, Mackie was no longer just a Marvel star. He became a witness, the man delivering the final, truest portrait of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Tribute or exposure? That question still hangs in the air. To many, Mackie was the brave voice capturing truth to safeguard a friend's legacy. To others, he crossed the fragile boundary between honoring and violating. But whatever side one takes, no one can deny this. With a single statement, Mackie added a new layer of meaning to Malcolm-Jamal Warner's name. He was no longer just Theo from a legendary sitcom. He was a man who lived, who feared, who longed to be remembered as a good man. And by exposing that truth, Anthony Mackie ensured his friend's fear of being forgotten would never come to pass. Malcolm through Mackie's eyes, beautiful human being. Anthony Mackie didn't say much, but among the few words he chose, one phrase repeated: beautiful human being. For Mackie, this wasn't flowery language. It was the truest definition of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. And when those words went live on People on August 2, 2025, they sparked a shift. The public began to see Malcolm not only through the lens of Theo Huxtable, but through the lens of a man, a soul of beauty. Malcolm more than Theo Huxtable. In the memory of generations of Americans, Malcolm will forever be the witty teenager from The Cosby Show, 1984-1992. But as Mackie emphasized, Malcolm was not just Theo. To him, Warner was a multifaceted artist. After the legendary sitcom, Malcolm continued to carve out his own path, starring in Malcolm and Eddie, appearing in Suits and The Resident, and finding remarkable success in music, earning a Grammy in 2015 for his contribution to Jesus Children of America alongside Robert Glasper and Lala Hathaway. He was also a spoken-word poet, using his deep, resonant voice to tell stories of identity and humanity. Mackie once shared in an interview, "Every time I was around him, I was able to take full advantage of those conversations and that time. What he took advantage of wasn't a lesson in how to be famous, but in how to be a man standing firm in his craft while holding on to his integrity in life." In Mackie's eyes, beautiful human being wasn't a title. It was how Malcolm showed up in everyday life. He wasn't flashy, wasn't showy. He cared about small things, spending time with friends, talking about fatherhood, worrying about how his daughter would grow up under the public eye. Once, according to Mackie, Malcolm sighed, "I just want to be remembered as a good man." And it was that same line the public later heard again in his May 2025 appearance on Hot and Bothered. A private moment had become a public message. Mackie became the bridge that allowed the world to understand Warner wasn't chasing immortality on screen. He was chasing kindness in memory. Tribute. When Legacy is written on soon after Malcolm's passing, the podcast, Not All Hood and H, which he co-hosted, aired a special tribute episode. Friends, colleagues, and spoken word artists came together to share stories, read poetry, and replay recordings of Malcolm. People. Com described it as a memorial filled with tears, but also laughter, just like Malcolm himself, authentic, unpretentious, yet always radiating positive energy. Mackie didn't appear in that recording. But the words he gave to people ran parallel to the tribute completing the portrait of Malcolm. He was a television legend, a father, and a friend. From the moment Mackie spoke, the phrase "beautiful human being" began to echo everywhere. Fans wrote it on Twitter X. News outlets repeated it in headlines. Those who had worked with Malcolm nodded, saying yes, that was him. The irony is striking in a Hollywood defined by controversy, where stars are often remembered for scandals or iconic roles. Malcolm came to be remembered by two simple words: beautiful human being. And that was the weight of Mackie's voice. Without Mackie, Malcolm's legacy might have remained forever confined to the image of Theo Huxtable. But now, the world remembers him as a man who wrestled with fear, who worried about legacy, yet ultimately lived and left with kindness. When truth becomes memory. Mackie's words were not just a tribute, they were a seal. He pulled the public out of the sitcom illusion and placed them before the real portrait, Malcolm-Jamal Warner, a beautiful human being. And perhaps that was how Mackie conquered his friend's greatest fear. If Malcolm once worried he would be forgotten or remembered only as Theo, then now, thanks to Mackie, he is remembered exactly as he wished, as a good man, a beautiful soul, a legacy that cannot be erased. Anthony Mackie, the man behind Captain America's shield heart. Fortune and enduring legacy. The fortune, from the stage to Marvel's heights. Before becoming Falcon and eventually Captain America. Anthony Mackie walked a slow and difficult road through the arts. He began on the Broadway stage, struggling with small roles and meager paychecks. But step by step, each rung of the ladder brought him higher, from sparsely attended theater performances on Broadway to the moment he spread his falcon wings in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and ultimately to becoming Captain America for an entire generation. By 2025, Anthony Mackie's net worth was estimated at around $8 million, a figure modest by Hollywood standards, but one that carried the weight of persistence and bold choices. Most of his earnings came from MCU blockbusters like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Avengers Endgame, and the series The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, along with a number of acclaimed artistic films. Beyond the screen, Mackie once ventured into business, opening the bar No Bar in Brooklyn, a small artistic hub he ran from 2011 to 2015, before deciding to return to New Orleans to invest more deeply in his hometown. There he opened a restaurant, managed a roofing company, built a recording studio, and founded a nonprofit to encourage young people to pursue STEM education, all rooted in his desire to give back to the community that raised him. His biggest ambition in the years ahead is to build a film studio in New Orleans, transforming the southern city into a new Hollywood, nurturing young talent, and preserving the cultural identity he has always carried with pride. Compared to Marvel co-stars with fortunes in the hundreds of millions, Mackie's $8 million might seem modest, but he never measured himself by wealth. He chose to invest in people and community. He wanted to leave something lasting, not flaunt mansions and supercars. Love and family, from childhood sweethearts to quiet solitude. Anthony Mackie's love story reads like a sweet novel. He met Shaletta Chapel back in first grade. On the playground in New Orleans, young Mackie's eyes quietly followed the girl who would later become his wife. That friendship blossomed quietly, growing into love. In 2014, after years together, Mackie held a secret wedding in the Dominican Republic. No flash, no Hollywood glamour, just a few dozen loved ones in attendance. Together they had 4 sons, his pride, and the most important piece of his life. But fairy tales don't last forever. In 2018, Mackie and Shaletta quietly parted ways. No press, no drama, Just a man returning to a smaller home learning to balance life as a Marvel star and a single father. He once admitted, "The idea of dating is tough. I just want to be loved and appreciated." Those simple words struck a chord. People saw that behind the heroic Captain America was still a man fragile, yearning for the same peace and warmth as anyone else. Legacy. The first Black Captain America and a timeless symbol. The moment Marvel announced Anthony Mackie as the first Black Captain America was a historic milestone. Many Black audiences wept. In that image, they saw themselves their dream of recognition and representation. Mackie understood the weight of that responsibility. He said, "I want Black kids to look at Captain America and see themselves, to know they deserve to be heroes, that no one has the right to deny them." His legacy extends far beyond the screen. In a Hollywood still plagued by prejudice, Mackie's presence opened doors for a new generation of artists. And by constantly honoring New Orleans, the city that raised him, he revealed another legacy, one rooted in origin. His dream of opening a studio there is not just about art, but about bringing film to his community, creating jobs for local youth. What makes Mackie unique is this: he doesn't just play a superhero, he lives like one. To colleagues, he is remembered as funny, lighthearted, always bringing laughter to the set. To his community, he devotes himself to STEM, giving young people a chance to break free from poverty. To his family, he is a devoted father, willing to set aside his career to be present for his 4 sons. He doesn't chase glamour, doesn't seek the spotlight. He still enjoys a drink at the local bar, still chats with neighbors, still carries the spirit of New Orleans in everything he does. If his legacy could be summed up, it is this: true heroism lies not in a shield, but in a heart that knows love loss and how to share. And in that simple, compassionate image, people see the spiritual legacy of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, the big brother who lived and gave with the same hope to be remembered not for fleeting fame, but for kindness, humanity, and the power to touch lives. 1. Like one share from you is a way to spread the spirit of true heroes, people who live from the heart. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the best videos on this channel.